This evening, we would like to welcome Joanna Walpole. She's our current NRPI executive that is running for the cases within the ASSAP executive. Now, Joanna, she's a lifelong civil servant. She now happily is retired, but she is just as busy as before. She's an ASSAP accredited paranormal investigator and was a tour guide in the 80s and 90s at Britain's most haunted house, Chingle Hall, in Goosenarg and Lancs. She is currently a tour guide at the moment for Samlesbury Hall. So let's hope that in the future we get another talk from Joanna about Samlesbury. That's near Blackburn and is also well known for the notorious ghostly White Lady. She also enjoys her hobby of scare acting at Halloween at a Lancashire scare attraction. So without further ado, Joanna, welcome to ASSAP. I believe it's your first webinar, and
Yes,
over to
indeed.
you.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much, Caroline. Thank you. Um, I would just like to say thank you very much for having me tonight. And today it's absolutely freezing over here in Lancashire. I live in an old farmhouse, also haunted, and it is absolutely bitterly cold. So I would just like to talk today really about my experiences at Chingle Hall at Goosner in Preston, Lancashire. The hall sadly has been closed now for 30 years, but those were the best days of my life. I was at the time also working at the Lancashire Evening Post. And I would literally finish work on a Friday. I would head up to Jingle Hall and I would literally stay there most of the weekend. So we have had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bits of information about what people see at Jingle Hall. I must say it was very, very rare for nothing to happen. We would find that, in the morning, it must have been maybe one in 20 or 30 overnight stays that somebody said nothing happened. But of course, we never absolutely faked anything. Everything there was genuine. So let me just give you a bit of background on Chingle Hall. And it was built in AD 1260. It was originally a moated farmhouse. It was a moated manor house, which was very rare because it was very, very small and still is extremely small. The moat was filled in quite some time ago, but the drawbridge, which would have been originally wooden, was replaced by a brick bridge at the moment. It's very, very famous as well for being the birthplace of St. John Wall, who was one of the English martyrs. He was executed in Worcester in 1678, in the times when Catholicism was outlawed. And Chingle Hall was used for secret masses during the Reformation. They have 3 Chingle Hall hides for priests, 3 that was being found to this day. And it was a secret mass center. Now, my life as a tour guide, I was there for 8 years, 8 very happy years. We guided thousands of paranormal enthusiasts from around the globe, and they would have daytime viewings and nighttime viewings. I enjoyed the nighttime ones because I actually got to sleep in the haunted houses, in the haunted rooms as well. Daytime, people could do private tours, and it was sometimes open, to the public as well. I've got masses of personal paranormal experiences. However, being the nature I am, I dismiss more than I actually accept. Now, I'm just going to tell you, time permitting, about some of the absolute inexplicable stories. One of them was the key and the staircase, the mystery of the missing key. We had a guide's bedroom, and there always had to be two people on at night because people would come usually at 9 o'clock at night and they would stay there till 8 o'clock in the morning so they could sleep in. They had the option of paying to sleep in. So we were never meant to be alone simply because we didn't really know who was in that house. And people would come, maybe 8 people at a time. I think the most we ever had was 12 in one go. So anyway, on this particular occasion, Anna, my co-guide and a personal friend as well, sadly passed away now, she was going downstairs to make breakfast around 7 a.m. And I'm not the most, well, I'm not the best in the morning. End of story. I'm just no good in the morning. So I said to her, oh, I'll just hang on 5 minutes. You go down, I'll meet you in 5 minutes. Now, in between our beds, there was a little glass jar on the bedside table. And whoever was the last guy to go down had to lock that room up. Again, bear in mind, there were strangers in the house. So it was absolutely imperative that the room was locked up. Anyway, Anna had gone down this morning. I got dressed and I'm groggy as I am, started to go out of the room. And then I looked for the key. And I thought, where's the key? It's not here. I looked on the floor. I looked around. And it was absolutely nowhere in sight in the bedroom. So I thought, I'm going to have to go down. I bet she's put it in her pocket. Sometimes you do this without thinking, really. She has got it in her pocket. I was absolutely convinced she'd walked off with it, maybe feeling tired and just not with it, just like me. Anyway, I get out of that guy's bedroom. I took one step down towards the dining room, the great hall, which leads onto the kitchen, and something was thrown at me from behind. It hit me on my shoulder, and I knew instantly what it was. And sure enough, there was the key. An invisible hand had thrown that key at me from nowhere. Bearing in mind, it's early in the morning. The guests in the house were in the two haunted rooms. We used to have to get them to get sleeping bags. So they were snoring away there. There wasn't a soul in sight. Yet something had actually hit me with that key, thrown it willingly at me. And me being me, I felt I had a great affinity with whatever was in that house. I was never, ever scared. And I just said, thank you. Thanks for that. So that was my missing key story. Okay, sorry, just one moment. We just need to, there we go, next slide. Now, this is a very, very interesting story that just simply cannot be explained. There was one particular time that a family had come for an overnight stay, and they were from Liverpool. Now, the guide that I was working with that night was Christine, again, another personal friend. And normally, us guides, if the people wanted to chat with us, we were allowed to stay up till midnight. And after midnight, we had to go to bed, give them some time on their own. Most people wanted to chat with us for a few hours, find out our experiences and so on. But anyway, this particular family stood out like a sore thumb. There was a mother, a father, and two grown-up children. Now, the reason they stood out is simply because they were so, so noisy. Normally, we can get to sleep in the guy's bedroom and, people drop off and we can have a good night's sleep. But this family were up and down, screeching, running around. They were really hyper. So they really, really stood out. Anyway, no problem. The next morning, at that time, by the way, the owners of Chingle Hall were away. I was entrusted with locking the house up for the weekend, so I had the lockup key. So as they were coming out in the morning after the breakfast, they gathered things together from the haunted rooms, and I was just basically escorting them out. So I was standing at the bottom of the staircase, and I was just watching them all go, making sure everybody was out before I locked the house up. And the father was there videoing his wife and his two children coming down the stairs. No problem. I actually watched his daughter. She was carrying a sleeping bag. I watched her coming down those steps. Nothing unusual about that. So they went off home. Nothing else. Now, a week or so later, they came back. I was on during the day because there were Sunday tours during the day, and we had a caravan in the grounds which acted like a office. And they came back. And this time they walked into the caravan and they were very, very quiet. And I said, "Oh, hi." He said, "You're back quickly. You must miss the place. You love it, don't you?" Just making a bit of a joke with them. And they said, "We're really frightened now." They said, "We've brought the video back for you to have a look at. We want to show it to the owners and the guides, see what you think of this." So I knew there was something wrong with them because they were very, very quiet and very nervous. So we indeed took the video in to the house, and the owners, John and Sandra, we all sat down and we watched it. And quite clearly, behind the girl, the last girl down the stairs, suddenly out of a wall where there is no staircase, but where previously they believed there had been, a shadow figure literally walked out and followed her down the stairs. There was no doubt what it was. It was a separate entity. She was much smaller than this figure. The figure was bigger. It was obviously a masculine figure, and you could actually see its legs walking down. They were moving at a completely different speed, and it basically just followed her down the stairs. Now, bear in mind, I've been watching all this. The father had been videoing. Nobody saw anything. Neither of us saw anything. But this particular case was inexplicable. Now, the owners of Chingle at that time, they actually sent it to BBC to be examined to see if there'd been any tampering with the tape. And guess what? Nothing had been tampered with. So that is another totally, totally inexplicable event that happened. I will also tell you about the ghost cat in the guide's bedroom. One day, I was actually on my own because the other guide hadn't turned up, and I was asleep. And it was very, very dark, simply because it had thick, thick blackout curtains. You literally couldn't see a hand in front of your face. But I was woken up in the middle of the night by a cat jumping on me. And I know it was a cat because I have animals at home. I know exactly the feeling when a cat jumps up on you. And this cat started walking up my body, jumped onto about my stomach, and slowly, slowly started walking up my body. And when it got to my throat, I suddenly felt the biggest chill, literally as if somebody had poured a bucket of ice down my spine. I shivered. I huddled into those the covers, and the minute I shivered, that weight disappeared. The weight just literally disappeared off me. So, I was left thinking that night, what on earth was that? What on earth was that? So in the morning, I asked the owners, I told them what had happened, because I, as a guide, and none of the other guides had ever been told about any ghost cats. And they just looked at each other and they said, "Oh my God, we have never ever told the guides about this cat because we didn't want to scare you off." Because believe it or not, although I was never frightened of anything at Chingle Hall, quite a few of the guides were very, very nervous. And imagine, being put into a room when you know there's a ghost cat. Um, so talking about that room, another little story for you. Again, inexplicable. There was one particular day, my co-guide had rung in sick, so I was on my own again. And I normally used to get a lift because his Chingle Hall is quite in the countryside. The bus route doesn't go that often. But anyway, he used to give me a lift down to the main road where I could get a bus back to Preston. But this particular day, he'd rang in sick. And I was thinking, okay, right, okay, I'm going to have to find another bus to get to the main bus stop. So I looked in my purse and I looked and I knew how much a bus fare was. And I was £1 short, just £1 short. And I thought, oh no, I am going to go down. I'm going to have to ask John and Sandra if they can lend me £1, or should I just walk it? I was sitting there pondering, and right in front of me, guess what appeared on the rug? £1 coin. Now, if that isn't something that is responding to me, I don't know what is. So another thing that I wanted to tell you about was the kitchen incident. Anna and myself were making in the kitchen. We were making breakfast in the kitchen, minding our own business. And it was a large kitchen, actually. Anna was at the sink. I had my back turned to the cooker. And I remember I was putting jam into dishes for the breakfast table. We had put toast in to the grill, and it was an old-fashioned cooker, and the toast rack slotted in basically at the top. It's not one of these that could have fallen out. You literally had to lift it and slot it into place. Next thing we know, we heard an almighty clatter. We both spun round, and something had taken and thrown that grill pan across the whole room. So basically, the grill pan was on the floor, toast was everywhere, and me and Anna, we just looked at each other and says, "Oh wow, that is something else." So yeah, okay, an interesting one here. So, how many of you remember Les Dawson? Our popular comedian. He only lived in Lytham St Anne's, which was very close to Chingle Hall. And we found out after talking to him for hours in the caravan afterwards that he was a massive fan of the paranormal. He did tell me one story that really stuck out, and he said he was absolutely terrified by it. He'd been round, I'd taken them round the hall, we sat for ages chatting, and he said, "What do you think of this?" And he was not joking. This was deadly serious. He told us that after his first wife's mother died, he was in bed one morning with his wife, just as normal, and he just turned around in bed and he was just going to put his arm around his wife. He opened his eyes, and there, grinning at him, was not his wife. It was his mother-in-law who had just passed. Wow, what can I say? He said he understood that was her sense of humor, and he said, "I knew exactly exactly that that was the sort of trick she would play on him. So somehow or other, his dead mother-in-law had come back and presented herself in his bed. He was quite frightened about that, quite chilling. So, yeah, a real life haunted house does exist. Unfortunately, for 30 years now, the house has no longer been open to the public. It is now in private ownership. You may remember, the older people of us may remember, there was quite to do about this. It was all over the certainly the Granada Reports news, and I think it was even on national news. But what had happened in a nutshell, the owners had sold the house, then regretted it. And this gentleman, he was an eye surgeon and he worked in Canada. And he didn't want anything to do with ghosts or ghost hunting. So it does beg the question, really, um, why would you buy a house, Britain's most haunted house, and then literally close it to the public? And now, obviously, there are many other haunted houses in Britain, though I can vouch, certainly for Chingle Hall, there has never been anything remotely like it as far as reported activity goes. So, what is this? Whatever was there interacted with me. It actually interacted with myself, as can be proved, with the pound coin, so many things. And these are only the things that I've told you that, I cannot explain. As I say, I dismiss things. The amount of doors opening, the amount of footsteps, things falling over. Incredible. It is believed that, it's on a very ancient site. It still is on ley lines. And there have been beliefs that, there is a lot of paranormal activity actually on ley lines. Apparently, I've heard somebody told us that churches are built on ley lines. I don't know what the connection is. And there was a Viking longhouse there as well. So that's really my personal experiences, apart from one I just want to tell you about as well. My mum and my sister absolutely do not believe in anything like this. It is, oh, nonsense. Nonsense. It's not possible. I used to tell them, yeah, it is possible, and it has been happening. Hundreds of thousands of people over the years have come through those doors. The waiting list for people to book a night at Chingle Hall, sometimes you had to wait a year. But just tell you about this little one as well. After hours, obviously we were allowed to do a private tour to our friends and family if we so wanted. It was way after hours, way after hours. So I made sure everybody was gone. The car park was completely empty. And the house is in a place, it's down a long country lane. You don't get passers-by, is what I'm trying to say. You have to make a deliberate effort to go there. So I know the office was locked up, the car park was empty. And I decided to give my mum and my sister a private tour. So anyway, I gave them the tour, probably lasted an hour. And we came back out to the car, and bearing in mind there was nothing else in that car park, nothing at all. And the two car doors were wide open. My mum's door and my sister's driver's door, both wide open. And we all gasped because Mum and my sister know they locked that car up. So how did that actually happen? I could go on and on and on about all these experiences, but I think I want to give a chance for anybody who might want to chat. I'm particularly interested, if we've got time, which I think we possibly have, if anybody has actually been to Chingle Hall and had any experiences themselves. I think we've got time. If anybody wanted to talk about those, they'd be most welcome. So that's the main talk from me. And thank you very much for listening on that.
Joanna, thank you so much for that. This is a property that I've never heard anything about, to be honest with you. It's not something that's come onto my target of places. I'm quite insular in some ways, that I keep quite close to home because I enjoy what's on my doorstep. So this was a delight to hear about this. And yes, it would be absolutely fascinating in a minute if we could maybe, if anyone has been there and had an experience, raise your hand on the platform, and then we can help you go live, and then you can speak directly to Joanna. But in the meantime, Joanna, do you just want to stop sharing your screen for us?
Sure.
Um, I'm interested because you're a new speaker for us in ASSAP, and you're a new speaker, as far as I'm aware, in the paranormal community. So, what was it that brought you to the paranormal world?
I've always been interested. It's been a fascination of mine ever since I was a little girl. I consider myself sensitive. I am not a medium by any accounts, but I do sense atmosphere. Um, Things happen to me, as a child. I know I've traveled astrally. Obviously, I couldn't explain it. I get a lot of deja vu. So many things happen to me, but I must stress, I cannot turn it on and off at will. If it happens, it happens, and nothing surprises me. I've just been drawn to the paranormal ever since I was a little girl.
That's really interesting to hear because most people's experiences seem to start from a young and an early age. What was the age that you first experienced something that you couldn't explain?
I can tell you that exactly. I've never been able to forget it. I was about, oh, I was very small. I was preschool. And I remember I was playing in my playroom. I had a playroom at home. And I was just chattering away with your dolls and toys as you do. And then all of a sudden I looked up and there was what I took to be a black stick of chalk. It looked exactly like chalk, but it was black. And it wasn't there a minute ago. And suddenly it was there. Now, of course, being little, I thought, wow, this is scary. So I went down to get my mum and I said to Mum, Mum, can you come and have a look at this? There's something on my floor. There's some black chalk on the floor. I just don't understand it. And Mum said, what are you talking about? Anyway, she came up. And of course, it had gone by the time, we just literally walked up them stairs. So at that age, I just never thought anything more of it. Now, I know it was near Christmas time. And for Christmas, what did I get from my mum? A blackboard, an easel, and the pegs that you stand the easel on, it was those. It was one of those. And as soon as my mum showed me, I opened my present up, I said, Mummy, this is what I saw. I actually saw this chalk. It was on my floor. I couldn't tell you if it was days ago or weeks ago, but it was definitely on the floor. And she said, it can't have been. She says, because I hadn't even bought it then, but it was on my mind all the time to buy you this blackboard for Christmas. She said it was constantly on her mind. Somehow I've got to find the money to buy this blackboard, because we weren't very wealthy people when, my mum, lived in a little terrace house. So it was quite, difficult to raise money to buy extravagant gifts. But yes, it was definitely that chalk that I saw there in that house without a shadow of a doubt. That was probably my earliest and the first that I do remember.
So going from this young child into this mature lady that you are, um, what happened en route to bring you to where you are, Joanna? What happened from experiencing that as a child to wanting to investigate?
Because so many things were happening to me. I needed to know more about these things. I remember as well, it's just, you just brought it to mind now. It's something that, again, is completely inexplicable. But I spoke and I communicated with a dead neighbor in a dream. Was I traveling astrally? Was it a dream? I don't know what it was. But I remember I was probably in my teens and I was working at the local newspaper at the time. And I always used to bring a newspaper to my neighbour. And I never forget her name was Mrs. Dixon, a lovely, lovely old lady who was housebound. I always made sure she had a paper. I'd just bring it home from work with me. And she always used to say, "Oh, my love, typical Lancashire by gum sort of thing, oh, you are good to me," and everything like that. She said, "Oh, I'll pay you back one day." And I said, "There's nothing to pay back, it's just a newspaper." So, anyway, she sadly passed away. And then in a dream, astral travel, whatever that state is, I wouldn't even guess. It was a lucid dream, possibly, I don't know. But I remember going out of, I still lived at home with my mum. We weren't particularly getting on, as teenagers don't perhaps get on with their mums at that time, and Mrs. Dixon was aware of this. So I remember walking out into my mum's backyard, looking over the gate, and we had a lobby. And at the end of the lobby, the door was open, and I saw Mrs. Dixon, obviously, who just died, but she was surrounded by a glow, complete radiance. And she smiled at me. And I can't ever get this out of my mind. I looked over the gate and I said to her, "Mrs. Dixon, what are you doing here? You're dead." And she said, "Yes, I am. But I always said I would repay you for your kindness." And I said, "Well, what do you mean? I don't understand." And she said, "Will you do one thing for me?" She said, "You only got one mother. Please get on with your mum. Don't argue with your mum. Make it up. Whatever's been going on with you and your mum, you've only got one mum." And it's a sad story, isn't it? A really sad story. But I was so impressed by this vision, this apparition, that I immediately went to my mum and, we made up. We hadn't been getting on and we made up. And that was all down to a dead lady.
Lucid dreams and having contact from alleged spirits is a phenomena that is reported on multiple occasions, and has been through history veridical. So I think they've even used it in a court case where the person knew information about a situation that nobody else could possibly have known. So yeah, I think certain people believe that spirits can come to you in lucid dreams to pass over messages. But given that you've gone on to have many experiences between then and now, including your new home that you're living in,
Yes, yes,
what
definitely.
what would you say was happening? How would you explain what you've experienced to other people?
It's really, really difficult to explain because, as I say, by nature, I'm a typical Capricorn. We dismiss more than we accept. It's got to be absolutely spot on before I'll even mention it to anybody. Um, It's strange because my late brother, he was exactly the same as me. We were both completely drawn to the paranormal. We've got a massive paranormal library. Been That's the only type of books I ever read. Um, and because so many personal things have been happening to me, we actually started off with our own ghost group. And obviously, this is pre-COVID. Everything went pear-shaped into COVID. But we used to run something called Eerie Encounters, which was our own ghost group, which eventually just became a big group of friends. You know, we did it so often. Um, I can't explain my fascination with it, but I am also living in a house that there is a lot of questions about, an awful lot of questions. It's 400 years old. And things have been happening. I've been here a year now. Things have been happening from day one, which obviously I am logging. Um, but I've always been drawn somehow, end up in places that are supposedly haunted. Um, my last house wasn't, sadly, except for one for one instance, which, was the smell of a cigarette smoke in the middle of the night and a blue light when I went to investigate, which was very, very strange. But the house previous to that as well, that was absolutely full of things. But again, all these stories I could spend the night talking about.
Well, tonight is yours, Joanna. Anything you'd like to share with us, that's absolutely wonderful. But I think really, as an investigator now, because you're an ASSAP accredited investigator and you're running the cases with us, what would be one piece of advice that you would give somebody new coming in to investigating?
Okay. I would say forget your gadgets. Really, forget your gadgets. It's funny we're talking about this now because only last week I was one of the presenters at Samlesbury Hall, and we did the Great Victorian Ghost Hunt, which absolutely was amazing. And basically it is obviously a ticketed event, commercial event for the hall because it's a charity. But we did a replica of Victorian items, let's say, that spiritualists would have used, some of the more bizarre ones. And nobody was allowed to bring in any modern contraptions, EVP recorders, EMF readers, whatever. There was none of that allowed. We had to present, there were four presenters, and we had to present our own equipment and let people have a go at it. So I would say the best days were like the Harry Price days, ball erectory days, when you're investigating with nothing but your eyes, your ears, a camera, and a notebook. Because so many people now, due to Most Haunted, these regular shows, they are absolutely convinced that that is ghost hunting. But nobody's ever proved, have they, that, electromagnetic is a ghost? What can I say? Just go in, use your notebooks, your eyes, your ears, and your feelings.
Some of the best things that we've had happen to us have been while we've been setting equipment up. So while you're in the process of putting the cameras on the stands and you have audible, very audible voices that are quite loud that everybody hears. So,
Yeah, yeah,
you can rule out quite a lot of things if multiple people hear it. So experiences, even though they're not, what's the word I'm looking for? Substantive, because there's nothing that can back it up sometimes if you're not recording. But having experiences, obviously, where you can log them and then other people come in and have the same experiences
yes,
can make it then, evidential. Excuse
absolutely.
me. So take the cat, for example. Nobody that you worked with within Shingle Hall knew about the cat.
Nope.
But then when you mentioned it, it was then a recorded piece of phenomena that was known,
Yes.
which helped it to become substantive. So yes, I totally agree. Cut back to basics, but I do use a lot of recording equipment to see if we can catch stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but do you think that my last question before I hand over to Christian to read the questions, do you think Shingle Hall had a different type of paranormal activity than other places, or do you think that it was run of the mill, bog standard apparitions, ghosts?
No, no. There's something unique about Chingle Hall, and this is the mystery of it, isn't it? The most important thing for me is that it was interacting with me. Now, um, I could tell you somebody who lived there for 2 years, who I work with now, he hated it. He thought it was evil. Now, I had the opposite, completely opposite. Whatever was there was helping me out. Like the pound coin, looking for the key that suddenly got thrown at me. I was never ever scared, ever. And the guides all used to say, what sort of atmosphere is this? Because when you walk in that door, the smell of wood smoke, the atmosphere is absolutely peaceful. It's almost like you're entering a church. There was never anything negative, and nobody actually reported anything negative. And whatever was there was actually interacting with the human beings there. Another thing I'll tell you, in the morning, we used to have to do a debriefing, for the people who'd slept overnight. So they'd have the breakfast, then we'd all sit round and we'd log absolutely everything. We went round the table, did anything happen to you? And people would come with all sorts of things. Now, being a sensible person, I know a lot of those things, possibly footsteps. That is not massive evidence. It could have been the owner going to the toilet or something. So they don't prick your ears up as much. However, on this particular occasion, there was a large group and things had happened to the rest of the group. And this one girl piped up. She says, do you know, I'm really upset. Nothing happened to me. Somebody heard this, somebody thought they saw this, but absolutely nothing happened to me. At that very moment, she was sat around the table. She had a comb in her hair, and it was one of those combs that you sort of put in your hair and then fold back on yourself. So, it was really, really sort of tied to her head. In front of a whole room full, that comb was pulled out of her hair and thrown against a wall. And there was at least 8 to 10 people witnessed that. And everybody just went, wow, wow, wow. We all witnessed that. And she was absolutely delighted. So what was it there? What was something that we couldn't see? Was listening, taking note of what the people were saying, and thought, right, well, I'll show her then. I am here. Pulled it out, thrown it against. So that's the biggest thing about Chingle. Whatever was there was reactive.
Thank you so much, Joanna. It's been delightful talking and catching up with your experience with the Shingle Hall.
Thank you.
Christian, if you want to unmute yourself, did you want to ask the questions?
I do, yes. I also want to make a little comment here as well. So, what I've been listening to, I've been looking online about what's happened at Shingle Hall and history and so on. I came across the BBC website, which you referenced earlier. And there's actually, this BBC website is so old. Actually, there is a comment section below that. And I believe you're actually mentioned in one of these comments.
Oh, I was on Granada Reports. I would have been, all the time. I did all sorts of TV interviews and everything.
Well, I'll read to you what it says here. It says, it's a person called Keith. Keith, I stayed at Shingle Hall 10 or so years ago. This is obviously when this website.
Yeah, of course.
It is a very spooky place. But then again, the guide just wound me up about stories of clanking chains and ghostly faces in the window. And generally, the night passed without incident. But at 5 o'clock, I was taking some random photographs on the staircase. The guide had suggested we had done this because sometimes that's when things show up the most and things that the eyes don't see. But then I was gently pushed in the back. But it wasn't in a violent way. It was just saying, like, here I am. Make of that what you will. And a person here called Beverly Martini says, I actually took a crystal clear photograph of a girl holding a bunch of flowers on a visit to Chingle Hall. And we took it back up to the owner, Judy, and the guide. And like us, she was truly amazed. So you actually mentioned twice on this website.
Well, yeah, now, there's so many things that people have reported to us, so many. even if they're mistaken, there's too many things that are just, I would love to go back.
I'm sure.
I would absolutely love to go. In fact, I did go back once after we all lost our jobs because when the new owner came, he didn't want any guides. It was private, so he let us all go. But I did manage to sneak inside. When I say sneak inside, not literally, I did ask him if I could come back with a few friends, my group, and have a look because we used to work there. How on earth I managed to do it, I don't know because he's apparently very, very against it now. But he let us in, and I was very, very sad to see that he'd modernized it. And I don't mean he'd taken stuff out, but he'd put carpets down where there were previously stone floors. He'd covered up the beautiful old sandstone fireplace and he'd put some sort of either electric or gas fire in, I can't remember now. He'd really tried to make it like just an ordinary house rather than keep the character. And that night, nothing happened. Nothing happened at all. I felt the sensation that whatever was there has left because I don't know what's been happening to him these last years. I really don't know. I do hope to find out. But I do wonder if the phenomena has continued in his residence or did it all leave because the atmosphere was completely different.
Oh, wow.
Completely different.
So I guess the first question actually comes from myself: is how did the local community perceive Chingle Hall and its reputation?
Oh, everybody knew about it. Absolutely everybody knew about it. It is so, so famous. People would ask the villagers, where's Chingle Hall? Because it was hidden down a side lane. You couldn't really find it just by driving around. And people were just so sick of sightseers, just driving up and then stopping and then taking photographs and literally turning around and going away. And another thing as well, I should have mentioned this as well because it is